Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. The city was a sprawling, shining jewel in the daylight, but at night, its underbelly revealed a darker truth. Skyscrapers reached for the stars, their glass facades reflecting lights that flickered across every inch of the concrete jungle. But beneath that polished exterior lay a labyrinth of corruption. A place where power was wielded by those willing to do anything to keep it. And it was into this murky world that Alex Carter was about to be thrust. Alex had once believed in the potential of his city. Fresh out of college, brimming with idealism, he had taken a job at Genetic Labs, one of the leading biotech firms in the country. He was a biochemist, a sharp mind with a knack for innovation. But over the years, that spark had dimmed. He'd seen too much compromise, too many deals made in the shadows. Projects had come and gone, many of them dubious, funded by sources that weren't public. He kept his head down, hoping to avoid the inevitable fallout when the truth would finally surface. But it was only a matter of time. The night it all changed for Alex began like any other. Late in the lab, the hum of machinery filling the air, he sat hunched over his workstation. The lab was mostly deserted, only a few night shift workers remained. Alex was in the middle of sequencing DNA from one of the lab's newest projects, a genetically modified spider. The higher-ups had said it was a step toward curing disease, toward finding answers that nature had long kept hidden. But something about it felt off. There was a darkness in the air, a sensation he couldn't shake. Suddenly, alarms blared, breaking the silence. Red lights flashed, and the automated voice echoed through the halls, "Security breach. All personnel evacuate immediately." Alex shot up from his seat, panic creeping into his chest. He grabbed his things, but before he could make it out of the lab, the door slammed shut, locking him inside. Confused and frantic, he slammed his fist against the reinforced glass, but it didn't budge. He glanced back at his workstation, the spider specimens still locked in their containment units until one wasn't. A sharp, stinging pain shot up his arm. He looked down, horrified, to see a spider, grotesquely large, latched onto his hand. Its body was a sickly green, legs twitching as its fangs sunk deeper into his flesh. Alex swatted it away, crushing it underfoot. But the damage was done. His hand pulsed with pain, his vision blurred. He stumbled backward, clutching the lab table for support as the world spun around him. Within moments, his legs gave out, and he collapsed onto the cold floor, gasping for breath as darkness overtook him. When Alex woke, he wasn't sure how much time had passed. His head pounded, and his body felt different. He groaned, slowly pushing himself to his feet. The lab was empty, silent now, the alarms long gone. The strange sensation in his body persisted, an unfamiliar weightlessness. He flexed his hand where the spider had bitten him. The skin was tender, but the pain had faded. But more than that, he felt stronger, his reflexes sharper. It was as if his muscles had been rewired, his entire being heightened in ways he couldn't explain. Stumbling out of the lab, Alex made his way home, his mind racing. Maybe it was a fever dream. Maybe the spider's venom had messed with his head. But deep down, he knew something had changed. He could feel it in his bones. That night, the dreams came. He saw webs, vast and intricate, stretching across the city like a map. Spiders crawled through every corner, lurking in the dark, watching from the shadows. And in the center of it all was a figure, a faceless being who controlled the web with a flick of his fingers, ensnaring the city in his grasp. When Alex woke, drenched in sweat, he knew the dreams weren't just nightmares. They were something more. Over the next few days, the changes became impossible to ignore. Alex found himself scaling the walls of his apartment without effort, his body instinctively adapting to the vertical surfaces. His hands could produce thin, silk-like threads, which he could manipulate with ease. At first, it terrified him. But as the days passed, he began to embrace it. There was something exhilarating about swinging through the city's skyline, feeling the wind whip against his face as he moved with the grace of a predator. But with his newfound powers came a sense of responsibility. The city was sick, rotting from the inside out, and Alex was beginning to see the root of it all. The crime syndicate that controlled the city's underground had its claws deep in every aspect of life, from the politicians to the police force. Nothing was free from their grasp, and they were using the very same genetically engineered spiders that had given Alex his abilities to maintain their stranglehold on the population. It didn't take long for Alex to find out who was at the center of it all. A man known only as the Weaver. He was the head of the syndicate, a ghost who moved through the city's power structures unseen, controlling everything from behind the scenes. And he had an army of spiders, thousands of them, bred in secret labs, weaponized to enforce his will. They prowled the city's underground, enforcing the Weaver's law with venom and fear. Alex knew he couldn't fight this alone. He needed allies. People who were willing to fight back against the syndicate's reign of terror. That's when he met Jessica. Jessica was a hacker, one of the best in the city. She worked with a group of renegade activists, people who had seen the corruption firsthand and were determined to take it down. They had been monitoring genetic labs for months, knowing that something sinister was happening beneath the surface. When Alex showed up at their doorstep, showing them what he could do, they were skeptical at first. But after a demonstration of his ability as scaling a wall in seconds, spinning a web strong enough to catch a falling brick, they realized he was exactly what they needed. Together, they hatched a plan. Jessica had access to files that could expose the Weaver's entire operation. If they could get their hands on the files, they could blow the whole thing wide open, forcing the authorities to act. But getting the files wasn't going to be easy. The Weaver's lair was buried deep beneath the city, hidden in a maze of tunnels and abandoned subway lines. It was a fortress, guarded by his spider army and his most loyal lieutenants. Alex knew it was a suicide mission, but he also knew it was their only chance. The night they moved in, the city was unusually quiet. Alex led the way, swinging through the darkened streets as Jessica and her team followed below. The entrance to the Weaver's lair was hidden in an old, forgotten subway station, its tunnels long abandoned by the public. But as they descended into the darkness, the sound of skittering legs echoed off the walls. The spiders were everywhere. Alex fought his way through them, his webs tangling with theirs in a deadly dance. Every step forward was met with resistance. But he pushed on, determined to reach the heart of the operation. He could feel the Weaver's presence growing stronger, like a dark cloud hanging over the city. As Alex moved deeper into the lair, the walls seemed to close in, the air thick with a scent of decay and dampness. The tunnels twisted and turned, an endless maze that mirrored the web in his dreams. Each step forward felt heavier, but he pressed on, driven by the need to end the Weaver's reign. The skittering of spider legs grew louder, more frequent, and it wasn't long before he found himself face to face with them. They were monstrosities, these spiders. Unlike the one that had bitten him, these creatures were engineered for war. Their exoskeletons glistened under the dim lights, and their fangs dripped with venom that could melt through steel. Alex barely had time to react as one lunged at him, its legs a blur. Instinctively, he spun a web between his hands and slung it toward the creature, catching it midair. The spider thrashed, trying to free itself, but Alex yanked hard, sending it crashing against the tunnel wall. Before he could catch his breath, two more came from the shadows, their pincers clicking menacingly. He dodged the first one, using the wall to propel himself over the second. His body moved with a grace and speed that still amazed him. These powers, once a curse, were now his greatest asset. He spun midair, shooting web after web, trapping the spiders in a sticky cocoon. But he knew they were only the beginning. The real threat was waiting ahead. He glanced over his shoulder, checking on Jessica and the others. They had taken cover, using whatever they could find to barricade themselves from the onslaught of spiders. They weren't fighters, they were hackers, strategists. But they believed in the mission, and that gave them courage. Alex nodded to Jessica, signaling her to keep moving forward. The tunnels began to widen as they approached the core of the layer. The walls, once crumbling and old, now had a sleek, metallic finish. They were getting closer to the weaver. Alex could feel it. His heart raced, not with fear, but with anticipation. The closer they got, the more his senses sharpened. The weaver was here, somewhere in this labyrinth, waiting for him. Then, out of the darkness, came a voice, smooth, calm, and dripping with malice. "You've come a long way, Alex." "I'm impressed." The sound reverberated off the tunnel walls, making it impossible to pinpoint its source. Alex froze, every muscle tensed. His eyes darted around, searching for any sign of movement. "You think you can stop this? You think your little powers make you special?" The voice echoed again. "I made you, Alex. You're just another piece in my web." Alex clenched his fists, his anger boiling over. He knew the weaver was trying to rattle him, but it wouldn't work. He had come too far to be deterred by empty threats. "I don't need to be special to stop you," Alex growled, his voice steady. "I just need to be better than you." A low chuckle filled the air, and suddenly, the walls around him came alive with movement. Spiders poured out from every crevice, their eyes glowing red in the dim light. They moved as one, like an army following orders. And then, from the shadows, the weaver emerged. He was taller than Alex had imagined, his body lean and angular, almost spider-like in its movements. His face was obscured by a mask, but his eyes shone with a predatory gleam. He wore a long, black coat that seemed to ripple with every step, and in his hands, he held a control mechanism for the spider army. "I've ruled this city for years," the weaver said, his voice cold. "You think you can just walk in here and take that from me?" "I'm not here to take anything," Alex replied. "I'm here to end you." With a flick of his wrist, Alex shot a web toward the weaver, but the man was faster than he appeared. He dodged to the side, moving with unnatural speed. In an instant, the weaver activated his control device, and the spider army lunged. Alex fought with everything he had. His webs flew in every direction, trapping spiders left and right. He swung from the ceiling, dodging their venomous strikes, but they just kept coming. No matter how many he took down, more replaced them. The lair felt like it was closing in around him, the walls dripping with spiders. He had to get to the weaver. That was the only way this would end. He leapt over the swarm, landing just a few feet from the weaver. The man didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled beneath his mask, as if this was all part of some grand plan. "You're too late, Alex," the weaver said, his voice full of confidence. "The city is mine. You'll never be able to stop it." Alex narrowed his eyes. "Watch me." In a burst of speed, Alex lunged at the weaver, his fists wrapped in webbing. The two clashed, their movements a blur of combat and acrobatics. The weaver was faster than Alex had anticipated, but Alex's newfound strength and agility gave him an edge. He dodged the weaver's attacks, countering with blows of his own. For a moment, it seemed like Alex might actually win. But the weaver wasn't done yet. With a quick motion, he activated a hidden trap in the lair, and the floor beneath Alex's feet gave way. He fell into a pit, the walls slick with webbing, and as he struggled to climb out, the weaver loomed over him. "You should have stayed in your lab, Alex," the weaver said, his voice dripping with mockery. "This is bigger than you. You can't fight progress." Alex gritted his teeth, refusing to give up. He could feel the weight of the spiders crawling toward him, their legs skittering along the edges of the pit. But he wasn't done yet. He still had one last trick up his sleeve. With a deep breath, Alex focused on the webbing in his hands. He had been experimenting with his powers, learning how to manipulate the webs in new ways. Now was the time to put it all to the test. He spun his web faster than ever before, weaving it into a thick, impenetrable shield around him. The spiders couldn't break through it, their fangs useless against the reinforced silk. Alex used the web as a springboard, launching himself out of the pit and back into the fight. The Weaver's eyes widened in surprise as Alex came hurtling toward him. This time, there was no hesitation. Alex grabbed the Weaver by the collar, lifting him off the ground with a strength that surprised even him. "It's over," Alex said, his voice steady. "You're done." The Weaver struggled, but it was no use. Alex spun a web around him, binding his arms and legs in place. With one final, powerful move, Alex slammed the Weaver against the control device, smashing it to pieces. The spiders, now free from the Weaver's control, scattered, retreating into the shadows. The fight was over. As Alex stood over the Weaver's broken form, he felt a sense of relief wash over him. The city was free. The Weaver's reign of terror had ended. But Alex knew this was just the beginning. The city was still sick, its foundations rotted with corruption. There were others like the Weaver, lurking in the shadows, waiting for their chance to take control. As he walked out of the lair, Jessica and the others joined him. They had survived, barely, but they had won. The files they had recovered would expose the Weaver's entire operation, forcing the authorities to act. For now, the city was safe. But Alex knew he couldn't walk away. Not yet. Not when there was still work to be done. The skyline stretched out before him, a sea of lights and steel. He stood at the edge of the city, the wind whipping through his hair, and for the first time in a long time, he felt at peace. He wasn't a scientist anymore. He wasn't just a man. He was the city's protector, and the web was his to spin.